Welcome to episode 105. There is no better time than right now to plan your vacation getaway. Don't have the time to plan? Use the friendly travel agents at 3D Travel Company by going to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and clicking the Book Now button today on the left-hand side. Hurry and plan your trip today so you can travel away.
Welcome to Who Did That Voice, the show where we take an in-depth look at voiceover. And now, here's your host, Trenton Larkin.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the show. Today's special guest is the voice of Scarab, the villain from Mummies Alive. Here's a clip.
How long I have waited.
Let me go! Who are you?
Don't you recognize me, my prince? Don't you remember your old pal, Scarab? Your father entombed me 3,500 years ago.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Help! Oh no.
With the strength of Ra!
Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Who Did That Voice. Today on the show I am so excited to be bringing you an interview with Gerard Plunkett. Gerard, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Well, you know, the very first thing we always like to do when we have a special guest on the show, Gerard, is to get to know our guest. And who was the young boy Gerard growing up, and how did he become the man he is today, and especially the actor and voice actor that you became?
Well, I grew up in Ireland, in Dublin, and I guess I just, was one of those kids that found I had a knack for mimicking other people. Started off being teachers and things like that, which kind of makes you popular with the other kids in school. And then, as time went on, I started to impersonate politicians and that kind of thing as I got older. So I actually started my career as an impressionist and a comedian.
Wow.
So, I would do impressions of famous actors or politicians of the day, and I would kind of do it a little different in that I would write small scenes. So instead of, some impressionists which do, this is this person and this is that person, I would just write a scene where there were several famous characters.
Yeah.
And act out the scene, and then people would discover who it is, or they didn't discover who it was if it wasn't good enough. So that was my kind of thing. And that's how I began. And
wow.
It was as a comic and impersonator. And then when I left Ireland and came to Canada in the late 70s, then I started kind of getting into television and theater and all of that kind of stuff. So that then just led to the voiceover. It was a kind of a natural thing. I was good at voices. So, that's how that kind of started. So it's just one thing kind of leads to another. You don't really plan it that way, or at least I didn't.
Yeah. It just kind of fell into it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, that's really cool. Well, one of the things we're going to talk about besides just kind of your beginnings is the show called Mummies Alive, where you played Scarab on that show from back in 1997, which was 20 years ago. It's hard to believe.
Right.
And so It is. It is really hard to believe, you know, and you acted on that show with Scott McNeil and Dale Wilson, who we've recently had on the show, Cree Summer and Graham Kingston, along with tons of other amazing actors like Matty Hill and so many other wonderful actors from Canada and some that weren't necessarily Canadian. But, you know, Mummies Alive was a show that was just very unique. It ran a long time for a season, but shows back then did run longer, you know, sometimes 40, 50, 60 episodes for a season. So you really got to know the characters. You really got some development of the characters versus a show that may do 10 or 12 episodes, and you don't really get much but a surface of those characters, you know, as far as getting to know them. But this show was one that was very unique. I really wished it had gone on for a second season because you guys were just amazing. It was a fantastic show.
Yeah, it was, and it was fun to be in that room, I can tell you. And that's the nice thing about what we call prelay, which is, you know, and I'm sure everybody else has addressed this, but this idea where, you know, it's the actors, you know, like a radio play almost. They lay down the voices, and then the animators animate to the voices.
Yeah.
And that's it's a very unique and special thing. And when you're in a room with a lot of great talent, as I was blessed to be on that project, and others, but that one too, you kind of just, you know, it's amazing. It's fun to be in that room. You know, there's people at the top of their game, and it only makes you better, kind of thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's always great when you get to work kind of an ensemble, you know, radio type show format, like you said, because, you know, there's more interaction, there's more fun had by all. And I think as a whole, the energy that's felt on a show that's done that way, it really comes across that way as well, that there was a lot of energy behind it and that there was a lot of just good connection, you know, so it was definitely an inspiring show for me.
Yeah, well, good. Glad you enjoyed it.
Well, and I loved it because of the historical aspect. You know, I've always loved history and especially ancient Egypt, you know, like the Mummy movies and just all kinds of different stuff that have to do with, you know, ancient Egypt. So seeing Mummies Alive, it kind of mixed with like what Power Rangers was, you know, where they morph and transform into these mystical, magical characters. Even Scarab transformed along with the mummy protectors of Rapses. So it was really cool because, you know, they had shows like King Arthur and the Knights of Justice and Power Rangers, and there were the Knights of Tir na Nog and all these different characters, whether they were live action or animated, where characters were protecting Ireland or protecting Camelot or protecting, you know, Rapses there. And, you know, it was just really cool to see these characters that transform. And so you've got this like magical, mystical with history, and it was just very well done. The music was amazing, and all of the voice talents that you worked with on that show, just stellar cast, amazing, and it still holds its weight today in gold. So,
yeah, and I also love the style of animation too. You know?
Yeah, beautiful.
You know, and that still holds up today too. When you look at it, it's, you know, it's very pleasant just to watch, and
yeah, the
it's
colors.
One of my favorite kinds.
Sorry. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, the colors are just super vibrant. They pop off the page, and everything is very eye-catching. And the music that was done for it is just unbelievably stellar. It's just beautiful music, and that paired with your voices just paired for a golden show that, you know, I really wish had taken off more than it did. But at least we got the 40-some episodes we got because it was super, super fantastic, Gerard.
Yeah. Well, everything has time, as they say.
Yeah, it does, you know, and maybe we'll get to see a revival, and maybe they'll bring you back as Scarab when they do that.
Well, that would be nice, yeah.
Yeah, it would.
He'll be older and wiser, but there you go.
Hey, you know, that would play totally in line with his character since he's like 3,500 years old.
Exactly. So an extra 20 years doesn't matter to him.
Nah, it'll be a good.
He doesn't even think about it.
Yeah. Well, you know, the next show I wanted to talk about is not an animation, but it is one that I really loved. It was really sweet. It was really fun and entertaining. It was 8 Below, and you played Dr. Andy Harrison. And what was it like getting to work on that Disney feature film?
That was fantastic. It really was. We shot on location in a town called Smithers, BC, was our camp, if you like. And then every day we would go up this mountain, you know,
Yeah.
Snow-covered mountain, I don't know, about 7,500 feet, I think we were at every day.
Wow.
Shooting on the mountain. So it was a big process kind of getting there every day and coming home every evening. But,
yeah.
you know, working with Paul Walker was, of course, the lead in that.
Yeah.
And, you know, tragically, he's no longer with us, but a lovely guy, absolutely. And the whole cast was cool to work with. I had a lot of fun on it. I really did.
I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad you mentioned Paul. I was going to ask you if you had had some, you know, good interaction with him and got a chance to really know him, because he just seemed like a really sweet soul, you know, a really kind guy. And I loved him in the Fast and Furious movies, but we got to see a different side of him in 8 Below, where he was just kind of this dog loving, down to earth homeboy kind of thing, where he was just, you know, good old country boy kind of thing, you know. And it was just a really good side of him that we hadn't necessarily seen a whole lot of. And Paul was just a sweet young man, very, you know, nice guy. And it's good to hear that from you too, because sometimes, you know, I've always been able to pretty much, you know, whenever an actor's on screen and they portray a character, there's always a portion of them that's coming through that character. You know, I say it's like 50% you and 50% the character, and that accumulation makes what we see on screen or hear on an animation or something like that. So that's really awesome to hear about Paul Gerard.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you talk to anyone who worked on that film will tell you that, you know, he was a very sweet guy, just easy to work with, very pleasant and easygoing.
Wow, that is wonderful.
It is. Because you know, we were all, I forget how many, there was, Bruce Greenwood was on that one as well, and who else? Linda Metz, I think. Yes.
Yeah.
Linda. Yeah, there was a bunch of us. So we were all stuck up this mountain every day. So you kind of had to, enjoy it, because otherwise there's nowhere to go, right?
Yeah.
So in that sense, it kind of brings people together. I remember one of our things we did in Smithers every night. We stayed at a place in Smithers. I think it was called the Lodge. It was like a big motel there.
Yeah.
Because it's a small town, so there's not much there.
Oh, I'm sure.
So, but we did find that they had karaoke. So,
oh, nice.
So that was a thing to do most nights, you know.
Oh, wow.
With the karaoke. So that was fun.
Well, and there's nothing like karaoke to bond a group.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's
so
awesome.
We had fun.
That sounds really fun, Gerard. Thank you so much for sharing some of those behind-the-scenes stories and information about Paul, because, you know, it always makes things more fascinating for me and more entertaining when I'm able to get to know an actor and get to share that story with my listeners, you know, and I hope that this, you know, is the same for all of my listeners, that whenever they hear an interview with someone, that when they go back and watch 8 Below, or they watch Mummies Alive, or whatever it be, or they're playing a video game some actor's done, that it makes it more personal for them, because they have some inside information that they didn't know before, you know? So I thank you so much for that.
Oh, no problem.
Well, the next thing I really wanted to talk about was a movie that I absolutely loved. It was called Sucker Punch, and you played the stepfather in that show. It was an amazing visual effect show. It kind of, you know, take you through this gambit of different visualizations and kind of fantasy stories within a real world scenario. What was it like getting to play on that show that came out back in 2011?
It was a great experience. Zack Snyder, as a director, is a fascinating guy. Of course, he's famous, I guess, for the 300 was one of his things, and then what was his other big one before that? The Watchmen. I remember the Watchmen was a big, and the 300, of course, and then Sucker Punch. He is such a cool guy to work with. He has this cool thing. He has like a little football, American kind of style football that he likes to toss around. he's in between takes, or he's thinking of something.
Oh, that's funny.
That kind of thing. He was a very sweet guy. The cast, of course, was gorgeous. The Emily Browning, Abby Cornish, Jenna Malone, Vanessa Hudgens, Jamie Chung, and Carla, and Oscar Isaac, who's now like a huge star.
Yeah.
Even John Hamm from Mad Men has a part in that. Scott Glenn, several others, great actors. So it was a really cool cast, and my part was, as you know, was the nasty stepfather, and then I also played a priest in it. So I turned into this crazed Irish priest at some stage later on in the film. So that was interesting because it was, a role with two characters within the same role, kind of thing. So that was interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really cool that you were able to, kind of diversify within that project. And when you talk about Oscar Isaac, I didn't even really know who he was until Star Wars when he played Poe Dameron. But when I was watching the preview last night, you totally see him in that preview. And his career has definitely grown a lot since that role back in 2011.
Yeah. And I remember because I had, some scenes with Oscar, which and Emily, mostly was with Emily and Oscar. So it's fun to have that. He's another exceptionally nice guy, and fun to work with, very easy to work with, and it's really good to see that he's done so extraordinarily well since that time.
Absolutely. Well, Gerard, thank you so much for sharing that information. I really appreciate it. Sucker Punch was one movie that I absolutely loved, and Zack Snyder is a genius the way he makes things, makes films and produces them. I love the visualizations that he uses and how he brings his personality to the screen. It's fantastic. Some of the other projects you've worked on, whether they be animation or live action or TV shows or movies, you've worked on RoboCop, Alpha Commando, Sabrina the Animated Series, Sliders that starred Jerry O'Connell, X-Files, The Outer Limits, the rebooted version, The Outer Limits, Stargate SG-1, Smallville, Psych with Sean Spencer. I absolutely loved Psych. It was super funny. You were on an animated show back in the day, late 90s, I think it was, called Dark Stalkers. It was about like vampires and werewolves and all kinds of different mythical creatures battling to save the Earth from a guy that was coming to Earth and brought some mythical creatures back to life to battle Earth. And so there was this good versus evil, but they were all like mythical creatures fighting each other. And you were even on Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show. A lot of people may not remember that, but I do. And that show was amazing. I remembered, when Dale Wilson was mentioning you, I was like, I know he played Scarab on Mummies Alive, but when I started looking back through the list of stuff you've done, like Dragon Ball Z, Snakes on a Plane, 2012, the movie when you were an MI6 officer, and Dudley Do-Right with Brendan Fraser back in 99, I was like, I know this guy because your face is everywhere. You're in so many projects across the gambit of the last 20 or 30 years, and you've really gotten to partake in some amazing shows, movies, and animations through the course of your career, Gerard.
Yes, looking back, I've worked with some really cool people in some really fun projects. I mean, Snakes on a Plane, for example, it's just a hoot. I still, people talk about my death scene in that, where, of course, I get swallowed by the snake and then I'm ejected from the plane. Yeah. So there's that famous scene of my little legs waving in the air. But the filming of that is quite fantastic because in order to facilitate the CGI, they had to take this shot of the actual snake across my chest, kind of thing.
Wow!
So to do that, they had like about I would say at least 12 handlers who were holding the snake on, so 6 on either side of me, and then the body of the snake, or part of the body of the snake, was across my chest.
Goodness.
And they just needed a couple of seconds of that so that then they could CGI the rest of it.
Wow.
But I remember that moment when they placed this creature against me as I was sitting on the floor of the plane, and they placed these things against me, and you could feel the power of this creature. You could, you knew that it could just crush you in an instant if it managed to get around your body at all. There was no way out of it. So that was quite an experience, because that thing was about 12 feet long or something. It was huge.
It was huge, yeah. So, I don't know if I could have stood there and let them put that snake on me. I don't know how I would have done with that, but that's pretty crazy cool, Gerard.
Yeah, well, every now and again in filmmaking, you're required to do some weird thing.
Yeah.
And that was certainly one of the weirdest. But and the whole place, I mean, of course there was lots of CGI snakes in it, but there were also lots of real snakes in it. I mean, they had tanks of these things, all different. Yeah, I don't know a lot about snakes, but they had lots of real ones and CGI ones as well as some rubber ones. But
wow.
But that was an interesting shoot, because for us, again, we were stuck on this plane, right? This interior of this plane. That's where the whole thing took place. It was a lot of fun too.
It was just a wild concept for a movie. I remember watching it and being like, man, Samuel L. Jackson was just going to town with, his particular saying that he says on the show. We'll not necessarily go into that, but it's a very, it's funny, it's wild, it's entertaining, and it's just a very unique concept that I think was really different for its time when it first came out.
Yeah, and it was an odd thing, really, because at the time the internet, this idea of things kind of catching on the internet was just becoming a phenomenon when Snakes on a Plane came out, and trending, I guess, is the word I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
So, and Snakes on a Plane, as we were filming it, was trending. I mean, people heard about this thing. It was a buzz on the internet, and it was. We were all kind of hearing about this every day on set, and we were thinking, "Wow, this is kind of a new experience." The movie's not even finished yet, and people are talking about it online, kind of thing.
Wow, that has to be fascinating.
it was fascinating. I don't know that it actually resulted in box office glory. It doesn't seem to have in the end, but it's. but people, once you've seen this film, you never forget it. It's like anything else.
How could you?
It's Snakes on a Plane. It's its own thing,
Absolutely.
Which is a bit like another favorite of mine was Rat Race. That I did, and the cast list on Rat Race is all the top actors, Whoopi Goldberg, John Cleese, can't even remember how many famous people are in that show. And that was a hoot as well. That was one of those wild, wacky movies that was all over the map and a lot of fun to do. But that's one that a lot of people kind of talk about that. They love watching it because
absolutely.
It seems to hold up.
Seems to hold up over time.
Yeah.
Well, that's the kind of stuff you want to be a part of, stuff that people remember 10 and 20 years down the road because they just have that quirk or that fascination about it or that uniqueness or, whatever the combination of things is that, people are still talking about it all these years later, and you've been a part of so many of those projects that have been very memorable and iconic or in one way or another, so.
Yeah. Wrongfully Accused, I remember, which was Leslie Nielsen, who's no longer with us. And that was probably one of my first kind of bigger movies.
Yeah.
And of course, I was a great fan of his, and got to work directly with him, which was a great privilege, and a lovely man and a lot of fun. He always carried a little machine, a little squeezy thing he had in his hand that would make a fart noise whenever he pressed. So, but you wouldn't know he had it. So whenever people were getting a little too serious or taking themselves too seriously, you'd suddenly hear this noise, which would kind of make everybody laugh, and then it would all come back. But that's a lovely memory I had for him. And in fact, my second son was born while I was shooting that.
Oh,
and
wow.
I remember being driven. I'd just come out of makeup when the phone rang to say my son had been born, my second son. So we drove to the hospital, and I was able to go and see him for a couple of hours before I had to go back on set and continue filming. So many wonderful memories around that. Leslie and, of course, my son being born, and Pat Proft, who was the director, was a lovely man, very gentle, kind man, and made it all very easy,
That's wonderful. I mean, those kind of moments where, your son's being born during that project, it makes it even more special for you because of the wonderful memories that you have associated with it, so that's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. Thanks so much for sharing all of these wonderful stories, Gerard. The next thing I really want to ask is, what kind of advice would you give to somebody who's looking at joining the world of acting and maybe more specifically trying to gear themselves towards the world of voiceover?
I think, for me, as I say, I didn't delineate between one discipline and another. To me, it's all acting. Comedy, I started in comedy. I was good at voices, so somewhere along the line, it was natural that I ended up in voiceover. But to me, it was an open field. I didn't see myself as being one thing. I know in the voiceover business, of course, there are voiceover actors that's their specialty, and that's what they do, and they don't worry about working in theater, or they don't worry about being on camera.
Yeah.
And that's a choice. But I think, why not be, open? Try it all. I mean,
yeah.
You don't know. I mean, it's like anything else. The more you put yourself out there and try other stuff, the more doors may open for you. So while voiceover is not going to go away, shall I say, and whatever experience you gain on a stage or gain on a film set or whatever, it's all about acting ultimately, right? But with voiceover, it's just your voice. You nobody can see you, so you've got to bring all this emotion, whatever the case may be, to the voice, right? So any outlet that helps your creativity, and of course, stage would certainly do that. Camera work will certainly do that. All of those things, it all helps. So I would just say be open to everything. Try it all, because it's all related. It's all the same discipline. Voiceover acting is acting.
Yeah.
If you look at Andy Serkis in Lord of the Rings, the character we see is CGI'd, right?
Yes.
As Gollum. But his vocal performance is exquisite and just, even if there was nothing there, if we were looking at some kind of shimmering light instead, and we were hearing that voice,
it would still be epic.
It would still be epic, and we'd still be drawn in. That whole scene he does where he talks to himself, the two Gollums, and has that argument with his split personality kind of thing, is legendary. It's fantastic, and that's just a great actor. And I think that's what I think great voiceover acting is. It's the same thing. It's being a great actor. So I would say, do it all. You're only going to learn from every experience. It's never going to diminish you. So go with the flow. Go with everything. of course, if you know, if it's your thing is voiceover, concentrate on that, but be open to everything else as well.
I love that advice, Gerard. I mean, so, diversify, do it all. I love it. You're really getting to the heart of the issue. And that's one thing I've learned, when I first started doing the podcast, differentiating, being an actor from voiceover. I guess in some ways I kind of thought of it as a separate category, but it's all one and the same. You have to be an actor first and foremost to do any of it: stage acting, TV, movies, voiceover. And I think your advice is dead on. It's perfect.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're doing, a pitch for a car lot or something, head on down today, and pick up, that's voiceover too.
Yeah.
Do you need to be a great actor to do that? No, you don't. you just need the voice that they want to do it, and and there's probably a living to be made of that too. I don't know, but I think once you get into the characters and animation and a storyline and a drama or a comedy, or you need all of those chops.
Yeah.
You need comedy chops, you need drama chops, you need those things. And where are you going to get them? You're going to get them, out in the world, but also doing other kinds of acting, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you, Gerard. Well, I have one final question for you today, and the question is, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind?
Oh, I never think in terms of legacy. I wouldn't. I remember when I was very young, probably about 9 or 10, and my sister and I, one of my sisters and I, were sitting and we were watching Laurel and Hardy or something on a Sunday afternoon, one of those old black and white movies. And I, got to the end of the movie, and I turned to my sister, and I remember saying, that's what I want to do when I grow up.
Wow.
And she said, well, why would you want to do that? And I said, because when I'm dead, people will still be laughing. And I guess I never really gave it a thought too much again after that, except that's kind of the idea, when I think of all the great people I've worked with, and some of them have passed on now as well,
yeah.
And not to bring it down, but, there are still films out there of that people can watch and still enjoy.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of a legacy, maybe, some of the animation I've done will still be playing long after I'm gone. I don't know, but that's a kind of a legacy,
It is.
So
yeah.
In that sense, I hope in a way that I've kind of left kind of a legacy, even if it's only in memory, because in theater as well, it's more immediate. People come, they see the show, they go away. However, you often meet people years after you've done a production on stage who'll come to you and say, I still remember that production. So those are legacies. You don't consciously make them. They're just there, and that's the nature of what we do as actors, I think. You just do your job. If it ends up being a part of somebody's life or a happy or joyous memory that they have as well, then that's a bonus.
Yeah, I love that. That's really good. A good sentiment, I think. I really appreciate you sharing your legacy with us, and it being just kind of what you're doing in life. If it leaves an impact on us, then so be it, kind of a thing. But I definitely think you have, Gerard. There's a lot of things you've done in your career that were in the forefront of my mind, and then others that I was like, wow, I forgot he was on that, it's those kind of things when we look back at an actor and we look at one thing like Mummies Alive, and then we look at the 30 or 40 other things that are prominent, as well in someone's career or whatever, that we go, wow, look at the mark they have left on the world and the entertainment they have brought to people and the joy and the happiness and sadness or whatever their characters are doing. So it's really unique, to hear that legacy from you. I really appreciate it, and I very much thank you for your time today.
Well, thank you, Trenton, for having me on. It was great fun, and best of luck with the show going forward. You're a cool guy, so keep it up.
I really appreciate that, Gerard. Well, Gerard, it has been an absolute honor and pleasure having you on the show today. Would you please give us a closeout as we wrap up our episode?
Hi, this is Gerard Plunkett on Who Did That Voice?
Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed today's episode with Gerard Plunkett, the voice of Scarab from Mummies Alive, and so much more. And if you did, please find me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram by searching Who Did That Voice. I would love to hear from you. You know, a question you might ask yourself is, where can I listen to Who Did That Voice? That's an excellent question. You can hear us on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio, YouTube, and our website at www.whodidthatvoice.co. Click the Episodes tab and listen away. Well, everyone, that's all the time we have for this episode. Join us next time for our special guest, Tracy Hoyt, the voice of Rini from Sailor Moon. You won't want to miss this episode. Hey, do you ask yourself who did that voice? Well, if you do, go to our website, www.whodidthatvoice.co, and click on the Episodes tab. Choose an actor, pick their name, and see pictures from the different characters they voiced in their career.
Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time for more discoveries on Who Did That Voice.